Blood. You can lose a little, and you can even donate. But if you lose a lot, it becomes a medical emergency. Hi there. This lesson is on blood. So blood is a very specialized body fluid that delivers nutrients and oxygen to our body cells and transports waste products away from those same body cells. And if blood has been removed from your body, either for donation or for testing, it can be separated into different components using a centrifuge, which is where they'll spin it really fast in a circle to separate the components by weight. Some functions of the blood include transporting wastes, nutrients, and hormones. So some of these are going to go towards the body cells and some away from the body cells. The blood is also responsible for preventing disease and infection, which is through the immune function, and also to assist in maintaining homeostasis, so our water balance, blood pressure, pH, and temperature. The blood is actually made up of about 4 different components. One is red blood cells, the second is white blood cells, the third is platelets, and the fourth is plasma. Now, red blood cells and plasma are the 2 largest components of our blood, and white blood cells and platelets make up a much smaller component. So, red blood cells are the most numerous in our blood compared to platelets and white blood cells. Generally, 1 drop of blood contains about 1 million red blood cells, so like a lot. The shape of a red blood cell is biconcave, so kind of shaped like this, but then kind of round on the edge, so like a concave donut. And this allows for easy movement through the vessels. It also increases its surface area. The lifespan of a red blood cell is about 120 days, and it can't replicate itself because it does not have a nucleus. So red blood cells are made in the bone marrow. And one of the important things that red blood cells contain is a compound called hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is what gives red blood cells their color because it contains iron, and then when it joins with oxygen, it turns that red color. And the hemoglobin molecules are what readily allow oxygen to join onto the red blood cells. And in the lungs, hemoglobin picks up oxygen molecules to form oxyhemoglobin and takes that to the cells of the body, where then the oxyhemoglobin gives up the oxygen to the body cells and removes carbon dioxide from the cells and brings it back to the lungs. And so this occurs in the capillary beds. So white blood cells are fewer in number but larger in size. There's 1 white blood cell for roughly every 6 to 700 red blood cells, so a lot fewer. It's also made in the bone marrow, and white blood cells do have a nucleus, but their lifespan is also short, about 13 to 20 days. And white blood cells play a very big role in the immune response, which we'll talk about in a couple topics. Um, Specifically, white blood cells can cross out of the bloodstream into the tissues to attack pathogens and infected cells to help remove them from our body. So this is an example of blood that's been separated with a centrifuge. We can see that there's clearly red blood cells at the bottom. At the top is a clear yellowish solution called plasma. And then about 1% of the blood is made up of platelets and white blood cells that were in the middle for density. So it's a little bit difficult to see kind of where that density might be in the actual sample, but it is there nonetheless. So platelets are another component of our blood, and they contain protein fibers that act to clot the blood in the case of an injury of our blood vessels. So platelets break apart when they encounter a rough surface in our blood vessel, so like a tear, and this triggers a complex set of reactions. The protein platelets called fibrinogen in the blood capture and convert to form fibrin, which is the active form of that protein, which then acts like a mesh to trap red blood cells until those blood cells form a clot and then onto a scab. A clotting disorder is hemophilia, which is where the blood has a lower ability to clot. So any injury could become a severe and life-threatening injury. Lastly, the blood contains plasma, which is a yellowish liquid made up of mostly water. It's kind of like broth that our red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets float in. It also contains things like hormones, nutrients, urea, antibodies, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And this is often where lots of carbon dioxide gets dissolved into in the capillary beds to be taken back to the lungs so that it can be removed. When we look at the most abundant cells to least abundant cells, plasma would be the most abundant, followed by red blood cells, And then white blood cells and platelets make up about 1% of our blood. So that's an outline about blood, its role, and its components. I hope you enjoyed the lesson.